Alrighty. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Yesterlore. I am a little late starting the stream today just because of technical difficulties again. Right as I was trying to boot up OBS, my Google Sheet, or not Sheet, Google Doc. Well, I also have a sheet that I was working on too, and that slowed down as well. But the Google Doc, more importantly, the one that we're reading from currently, with the rune poems on them, was not loading. It kept saying reload, and so I had to figure that out. But it appears to be fixed, and we're going to, today, finish the Icelandic rune poem. That's our plan for today, and it is a plan I know we will carry you through, because we only have everything on the screen currently, minus Is at the top, which we already did. Which, I don't know why, but that went back to being a single S, even though I fixed it and made it a double S like it's supposed to be last time. Don't know what happened there, but there we go. We did East last time, that's where we left off, so we've got Or, Sol, Tyr, Bjarkan, Madar, Lagur, and Ir left. And that's not very much, and we will definitely finish that today. And with whatever extra time we have at the end, which I suspect we will, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I would like to read next week, but also open it up for more suggestions. I'm still looking for more suggestions for things to do. And tomorrow I'm going to do a little update stream. I'm not sure when tomorrow, but it will be recorded and put on the YouTube channel in case you miss it. I will do an update stream on sort of it'll be a little bit of a retrospective of what we looked at so far in Yesterlore, and also what things I have planned for the future. Right now, the only thing I've decided upon is what exactly we're reading next, after the rune poetry stuff is done. But further future ahead plans, they're all still kind of nebulous, so that's what I'm going to stream tomorrow and record and put on the channel into just the Yesterlore playlist, not the rune poetry playlist, because that will not be rune poetry. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and reorient us at where we are in the Icelandic rune poem. We have done more than half of it at this point. I believe, yeah. We've done more than half. We've done exactly 9 out of 16. So, we are here at Or, and just like with the Norwegian rune poem, this rune is representing Awe, and we talked, when we did the Norwegian rune poem, we talked about how it is the name that is cognate to this rune, Yer, in Old English, but it looks a bit different. Oh, that's why it looked different, because it was the Norwegian one that I was looking at. There we go. We should be here. I was going to say that looked a little bit wrong. There we go. Yeah, we should be here. All right. Yeah, so we've done more than half, and we are getting to Or, which is often used to just represent A in Younger Futhark. And let's go ahead and read it. And I'm going to do my best, actually, this time not to spend too much time pointing out parallels. There are some very, very close parallels between this one and the Norwegian one in some of the stanzas we're going to see today. I'm going to ignore those for now, because we have, seems like, decided, people in chat and myself, mostly me, but also there has been some agreement of people in chat as well, to do a comparison stream or two. I think that will take about 2 sessions to go through comparing all 3 rune poems to each other, the stanzas that have parallels at least, because as we've pointed out before, the Younger Futhark only have 16 runes and rune poems, and the Old English runes have they're 29. Plus some others that don't have poems that go with them. So there won't be equivalents for all the Old English ones, so we'll just look at the ones that have parallels and see what kinds of connections or oppositions we see between the different corresponding stanzas in the different poems. That's what we're going to do next week and probably also the week after if it takes more than one session. So that's sort of the immediate plans moving forward. All right, so let's get into it. Not really thinking too much about parallels, but going through what do these rune poems say. So I'm going to go ahead and start it in Old Icelandic here. Or gumna góði an gott sumar algróin akur, annus alvaldur. So, or, which we've had before, it meant, when we translated it in the original rune poem, we talked about how it meant, it's cognate with yer, so it means year, but also just like time, season, and especially poetically, it is used to mean harvest. Actually, even in prose, sometimes it's used to mean harvest, because that's sort of the yearly thing that you look forward to is the harvest. So here, I would probably translate it as harvest, because or gumna góði. Harvest is a good thing, a gift, a good thing to or for men. It's really of men. It's gumi here, which is cognate to guma in Old English. We've seen this word before. So this would be like gumina góða in Old English. But it's gumna góði here. So it's like the gift, a gift of men, a good thing of men. A gift for men or to men. And ok, I'm gonna go the ok. Gott sumar. So this is good as an adjective here instead of as a noun here. It's sort of been nominalized here, but here it's still an adjective. Gott sumar algróin. It's a good summer. Algróin akur. So akur, this is actually cognate to the English word acre, and it in Old English, akur means field. In Old Norse, akur means like crops collectively, and this crops are algróin, all grown, and that's a way of saying they're flourishing, they're bountiful crops. So kind of cementing the harvest meaning here. Harvest is a good thing for men. It is a good summer and bountiful crops. And then we've got the word annus here, which means year in Latin. So this is a little bit closer to etymologically what it's cognate with in Old English. Jar, which is where we get the word year. So this is the Latin word year, annus. Alvaldur here. Alvaldur is all, and then the word valdur, which means sort of like one who keeps or wields or protects, has power over. I think the best word here would be something like sovereign. But as with all of these, it's just a word that starts with the letter, if you were to write it in runes, that means king or prince or something like that. Some kind of word for monarch. Right, so that's year is the king. Let's go to the next one, if there aren't any questions about or there. I do want to say, though, while I'm not personally pointing out the connections, if people in chat are noticing connections, if they remember the Norwegian rune poem at all, then I totally welcome that. I'm not going to put a prohibition on talking about the connections. I'm just trying to not spend too much time on it because we're going to do that next week. All right. Next one is sol, once again meaning sun here. And it's sol skía skjáldur og skinandi róður og isa aldregi rota siglingur. And I think this needs, actually a couple of these I think need length markings. I thought I had normalized this before, but I missed some. Skinandi here means skinandi. So sol skía skjáldur. The sun is and this is clouds. Again, we've talked about how this is where sky comes from, skir, but it means cloud usually in Old Norse. So it is the skjoldur, the shield, skjoldur. This is cognate with the word shield in English, of clouds. It's the cloud's shield. Don't think shield as in covering or protecting. Think more shield as in it's round and shiny if it's made of metal. It's the shield in the sky is one way you can think of it, which is a name that the sun is given in a few sources in both Old English and Old Norse. And another name we're about to get that it gets in Old Norse is, and there is actually a parallel with this in Old English too, not in the rune poem, but in, actually, here I go, breaking my rule again. I think, was that mentioned in this one? No, it wasn't in Sia, it was somewhere else. Oh, I'm not going to be able to search by R, am I? Because I'm using these R's. Oh, well. Well, if there's a parallel, we'll point it out next week. But this name, Skinandi Rodul, does have parallels elsewhere as well. And what does it mean? Skinandi means shining. It's cognate to shine. Skina is to shine. And then Rodul is, it means like a halo. A round source of light. Often it just means sun in poetry, this word. And the cognate in Old English usually means sky. If it is indeed cognate, there's some problems etymologically with it, but if the cognate is rodor in Old English, it means sky, usually in Old English. But rodul is referring to usually the sun, which it is here, is the shining sun, shining halo. Och Isa Aldertregi. Isa Aldertregi. So Isa, you might be able to guess, means ice, and it's genitive plural. So it's of ices, of ice collectively maybe. And it is the Aldertregi. Alder here means life or age, but usually it's like life in the sense of how long something lives. And then tregi means like the sorrow or the cause of pain of ice, because it causes the end of life. It is the life sorrow of ice. The Alder tregi Isa, because it melts ice, of course. And then the word rota here, which I think is actually from the same root that rodul is distantly. Could be mistaken, but I think it's not. I think it is related. Rota, this is the Latin root that gives us words like rotate. Rota means a disc, or sometimes a wheel, in Latin. And so it's the disc, like the solar disc, mayhaps. Word Siklingr, and Siklingr means king. It's another word for king. All right. If there are no questions about sol, I'm going to move on to the next one, which is tyr, which we've talked about a lot. And here we see a parallel with the Norwegian rune poem very closely. It's almost word for word here. But we have the H's here in Old Icelandic that we didn't have in the Old Norwegian manuscript. We've got tyr einhendur Os och Ulfs leifar och hova hilmi Mars tyggi. So Tyr, which is the god Tyr, Tyr in Old English, is einhendur Os. He's the one-handed god. We had that in the Norwegian rune poem too. Och Ulfs leifar. Leifar is a word that's almost always plural. It's a pluralitatum, is what we usually call that. And it means the leavings. The leifar is the leavings, the remnants of, here, Ulf's, the wolf. The wolf's remnants. And this is probably a reference to Fenrir biting off Tyr's hand. So Tyr is what's left from the wolf, having bitten off his hand. Ok hova Hilmi. Hilmi means prince. It's related to Hjálmur, which is the helm, helmet. I guess it's because the prince is like the keeper. The helmet protects, the prince protects the place. Hova is of the court. The Hof is the court, and Hova of courts. He's the prince of the court. Of the courts. And then we have Mars being equated with him here. Tiki, and Tiki is yet another word for king. And I'm not sure the etymology of that. And I also am not sure of the etymology of Siklingur. I forgot about that. I didn't look that up. But a lot of these heiti for king, heiti being poetic substitution words that are formulaically used in Icelandic poetry, they have obscure etymology. The ones that I do know I've been pointing out so far, like breaking them down, but a lot of them are not easy to break down. I think the rest of them I have broken down a bit. Yeah, so, but in this case, we've got Mars being associated with Tyr, which is not that surprising if you know a little bit about the days of the week. Equating Jupiter with Odin was a little bit weird to some people last time. I kind of explained my reasoning as to why I think they did that. Usually when Jupiter is, like, when you got Interpretatio Romana going on with Jupiter going into Germanic, usually it goes into Thor in Middle Norse. Hence, the day of Jove, Dies Jovis, becomes Thursday. And that's based on the association of they're both gods associated with like thunder, Jupiter and Thor. But the reason that I kind of explained for Jupiter being equated with Odin here is that at this point in time, Odin was being sort of seen as a chief deity among like the Icelandic court poets. And so that's sort of the equation that's being made there. It's like chief deity, Jupiter of the Romans, and Odin of the Icelandic pagans, which at the time that this was written, they weren't even pagan anymore. So in retrospect, it's all kind of blurry. Saturnus with Thurs even more so. But with Tyr and Mars, that we see elsewhere. Tyr in at least the North Germanic sources we have seems to be associated with war, and Mars is the god of war. So we have that association, and hence Dies Martis, which is, the day which is called things like Martes in Spanish and Mardi in French. That gives us Tuesday. Tu being the equivalent of Tyr. I think I talked about this when we were doing the Old English rune poem, so if this is retreading, I apologize. But we've got that exact equation being made here, which is, fun fact, Tyr is actually cognate with Jupiter, or at least the U part of Jupiter. Jovis being the genitive, Jovis and Tu are cognate. Might not appear so obvious, but the Peter part of Jupiter is pater, which is father. In Latin, pater. So Jovis pater just kind of smushes into Jupiter in Latin. Because of Old Latin sound changes that make the A turn into an I when it's not stressed. So, fun facts, hopefully. Tyr is cognate with Jupiter, but equated with Mars here because of the war association. So that's Tyr. That's that whole rune. There's not much more to say there. Unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to move on to Bjarkan. Now, Bjarkan is interesting. So this was the rune that was called Björk in Old English. And interestingly enough, the I didn't point this out last time, but the usual word for birch is not bjarkan. We're like fairly certain that this is birch based on the cognates with Old English and also just what the poem says. But this word is a lot more close to forms of the word that means bear in Old Norse. And that's just an etymological accident. I don't think they're related in any way, shape, or form. They're not even from the same root. But it does transparently to a modern Icelandic speaker. If they see bjarkan, that's going to look like the definite form of the word for bear. It's like going to be the bear for a modern Icelandic speaker mostly. So that's just a fact I forgot to point out last time, I think, with the Norwegian rune poem, but it's here too, bjarkan. But we're fairly certain it means bear. Not bear, sorry. Birch. That's birch is the tree here. Although when we get to the Latin, it's going to get a little bit complicated because it doesn't mean birch in Latin. At least the Latin word that we got here. So we've got bjarkan laufgat lim och litet trä. Or say litet trä. Och ungsamliger... why can't I speak today? Ungsamliger wither. Abies budlungur. So, I forgot to lengthen an I again. It's always the I that gets me. You know, I think maybe I did have a lengthened I, and it got yeeted when I undotted these I's. Because there's so many dotted I's when I edit this to be manuscript reflective, I just mass get rid of the dotted I's, and I might have had this already marked with the accent, and it just got unmarked when I made that shift, I think. Perhaps. I think that's what it might have happened. But anyways, bjarkan laufgat lim. So birch is laufgat, a leaf begetting, a leafy limb. And we talked last time about, when I say last time, I mean the Norwegian poem. Limb meaning branch. Limb, branch of your body, limb of a tree. They're all kind of interchangeable in the old Germanic languages. So it's a leafy branch, och litet trä, little tree, litet trä, och ungsamliger wither. Ungsamliger, ung meaning young, youngsomely is if we were to like Englishify this. Did we have this word already? Did we have unsamliger? No, we didn't. We did have laufgrunster last time. But yeah, unsamliger is youngsomely. Youngsomely, wood, wither, wood, tree. We've had this word before as well. Wither, cognate with wood. And then we have abies budlungur. I'll talk about budlungur first, because this is our heiti for king. Again, it's another word for king. And this is actually, this ungur suffix often means like, sort of like the ing suffix we get sometimes with names of people that become, we don't really do it in modern English if you're confused about what I'm talking about, but in really archaic writing you might see like ings for descendants of a person. So if you have a person named like, I don't know, Harold, his descendants might be called the Heraldings. And this is a cognate suffix in Old Norse, ungur, although it doesn't seem to have been as common. They're sort of frozen in these heiti here most of the time. But here it's ungur is the suffix on the name budli. And budli is actually cognate to the English word beetle, not B-E, not the bug, beetle. I'm going to type it in chat. It's B-E-A-D-L-E, which is basically a position in like the church. I can't remember if there's, what's the English word that we use now for that? Do people still use beetle in modern English? The fact that I have to ask these kind of questions is, it's really just because I don't know what's restricted to modern English and what's just me having read a lot of old stuff. That the kind of things we read in yesterlore are just all in my brain, and so I forget what's not used anymore a lot of the time. But a beetle is basically they're like position in the church where they are basically just making sure things are proceeding in a orderly fashion, kind of like ushers in a church almost. I want to look up this term now. I want to see if it's still used. Pardon me. We have time. It's still early. Is beetle used anymore? I'm not sure. It's used in the Church of Scotland as an attendant to the minister. Okay. Do you have any quotes? Okay, the most recent quote latest quote I can find on this website is 1929. Virginia Woolf, a remote one zone. Okay, I'm sure there's more recent ones if they're like talking about beetles, but in any case, in Old English, the cognate beadle could mean beetle in the ecclesiastic sense, like a church usher, but originally it just was another word for a messenger. The root is the verb biddan, to bid or like ask, to give a message, and a bolda is a messenger, usually bolda, and then bidel is just like a derivation from that, so it's another word for messenger, but it could mean chieftain or king in that sort of sense, like basically someone who's in charge. And that's how Budli becomes a name in Old Norse for some kind of chieftain, and then Budlungur becomes a Haiti for king, descendant of king. Anyway, aside from that long tangent, let's look at the Latin word. Abies in Latin means a fir tree, which is not very much like birch. So it's an interesting choice. If we think about the other Latin words we've gotten so far, they've all been at least a little close to the idea. I think maybe the most different ones so far might have been like umbre, I think that it's just that one, and Saturnus maybe were pretty deviant from their sort of equivalent in Old Norse. Abies is just a different tree. It's just a plain old different tree, not the same tree whatsoever. So it's kind of interesting. I chose Abies, and I don't see any other motivation to choose it. It's not like, it has a B in it, but the Latin words don't have to have the same letter. It's the word for king that has to have the same letter by the rules of how this poem has worked thus far. Like glacies doesn't have an I at the beginning. Opera doesn't have an N. So it's interesting to choose Abies here for tree. I don't know the Latin word for birch, actually. Off the top of my head, I do not remember the Latin word for birch. So if someone in the chat knows, or has a dictionary handy, or just the internet, feel free to let me know what the Latin word for birch is. I'm not remembering it. I have not had to talk about birch in any Romance language for quite a while, so I actually don't remember the last time I had to. So I don't know any Romance words for birch. What if, actually, there might not be a word for birch. I feel like there should be a word for birch in Latin. Once again, reminding people that I am not a botanist. I've made this disclaimer before. So if I'm just completely, utterly wrong right now, I can't wait for people in the comments to school me on my botany. Let's move on to Maður here. Probably most commonly appearing rune in manuscripts because it's used as a sort of abbreviation for man. Whenever you need man, you just write this rune instead of having to write all these letters out. All right, so Maður mans gaman, och molder auki och skippa skreitir homo mildingur. Okay, so maður mans gaman. Man is man's fun. Gaman is related to game. I think we had it before. No, we didn't. We did have molder auki before, like exactly. Molder auki is like the increase of the earth, the improvement of the earth, the addition to the earth. It has that kind of range of meaning. And skippa skreitir. Sorry, I think this is a here. Skreitir. A skreitir is one who decorates or adorns something. Skreita is to decorate. And skip is ship. So it's the decorator of ships. That is indeed a thing that some men have done. People, because mother doesn't always just mean male. That's more gumi. Mother is a little bit more generic a lot of the time. So a person is the person's fun. People enjoy each other, I guess is what this is saying. Man is man's fun, man's joy. People like to be with other people, generally. We are a social species. So, yeah. That man's gaman, and increase of the earth, which is what we had in the Norwegian rune poem, and the adorner of ships, and then homo being the Latin word for man, in that like, sort of human sense, usually. Homo as in homo sapiens. Person. And then we've got mildingur, and mildingur is yet another word for, it's more like a prince, I think, in the poetry. It's related to mild. It's one who is mild. It's like a generous person, a generous king or prince. All right, the next one is logur. And logur is, again, a word that can mean river or lake or waterfall. I think we were talking about a waterfall in the Norwegian one. But it's basically just water in general. But it is cognate with lake. In the word lake, I think, is influenced from Latin, lacus, which I think is just a cognate, or maybe an early borrowing from Latin to Proto-Germanic. I don't remember. I think it's a cognate with lagus, which is the Proto-Germanic, which becomes logur in Old Norse and lagu in Old English. In any case, I think here it means either sea or lake, some big body of water. I think I'm leaning towards ocean here for the reason that we get this description, which I still haven't read yet, so I'm going to read it. Logur wellanda vatn, och víður kettil, och glómungur grund, lacus loftungur. Here we've got lacus, which is the Latin word for lake. So the Latin is lake, but that doesn't mean this has to mean lake, because as we've seen, the Latin isn't always giving a direct translation, but just a word associated with it. And there might have been some kind of recognition that these words might be related in the Middle Ages, because they kind of transparently do look a little bit similar and mean similar things. So, logur, so our body of water, wellanda vatn. Wellanda is cognate with welling, when something is welling up. Usually this verb wella means to boil. But I think here it's more welling in the sense that it means in English, where it's like a churning or has lots of waves. I don't think it's meant to be hot. And then we get watn, and watn is the word for just the generic word that is cognate with the word water in English. So water is welling water. I'm thinking it's the sea or the ocean is welling water because the ocean has waves. And we get this description of víður kettil. Kettil means kettle. That's where we get kettle from, and or like cauldron. Same thing. Big vat of moving water. Again, it could be boiling here. When we're thinking of cauldrons, we tend to think of boiling, but boiling sea is a poetic way to refer to the fact that the sea has waves a lot of the time. I don't think it's supposed to be a literal hot, like a hot spring or something, which do exist in Iceland, famously, but I don't think that's what's happening here. I think it's just wide seas, because it's a wide cauldron, and also because we get this glömungur grund. Now, grund looks like ground, and it is cognate with ground. Grund is a word in Old English as well. But in Icelandic, it has more of a sense, at least in Old Icelandic, of land, just like the realm or land where something lives. And here it is the realm of glömungur, which is of uncertain etymology and vague meaning, though it seems to refer to some kind of fish when we do see it. So people think that this is a kind of fish. It's just a kind of fish that starts with a G, so that it can alliterate with the G here. So it is the home of whatever kind of fish a glömungur is. The closest thing I can think, if I'm trying to come up with an etymology, the thing that comes to my mind is glam, which means noise or tumult, maybe like crashing, which reminds me of this whole like welling waves thing a little bit. But it seems to refer to some kind of fish, so it's the land of this kind of fish, which again makes me think ocean or maybe lake. And then we get the Latin lacus, lake, and then we've got lofthungr, another word for prince. This is another ungur suffix on a name lofthi. Lofthi is related to the verb lova, which in modern Icelandic usually means to promise, but it's sort of in Old Norse it's more like to praise. I think it can still mean praise in Icelandic too, modern Icelandic, but it definitely has a sense of praise in Icelandic, and it's cognate with the word love in English. Luvian in Old English, and especially Lovian, could have that sense of praise, something you worship in Old English as well. This is like a praised one, a beloved one, in the archaic worship sense, and it's like descendants of that person. So love these descendants. Descendant, I guess it's singular. So prince, it's another word for prince. Prince Lake. All right, last one, our last stanza of our last rune poem. We have got Ir. And I think I talked about Ir last time, how it's the shape of one of the Old English runes, the value of a different Old English rune, and the name of a different Old English rune. So, well, its value is the descendant of the value of the shape flipped over, and its name is cognate with the name of a different rune. To say that a little bit, hopefully more clearly, and its meaning is Ir is you. We talked about that, Y-E-U, W, like the tree, which is what it meant in Old English too. Eoch, and I talked about last time in the Norwegian rune poem, it often has a sense of like bow, because bows tended to be made from yew. And what we're going to get here is literally that. We get Ir bender bogi, og brotgjarnt jarn, og fivu, should be long, fivu farbauti, arcus ynglinger. Alright. Ir bender bogi. So, yew is a bent bow. Simple as. It's a bent bow. So this is referring to a bow, probably. And if you look at the shape, kind of looks like that a little bit, almost. If you're pointing the bow and arrow up, mayhaps it's like, I don't know, it's kind of the other way around, but, you know, extending it behind. I don't know. You can imagine it, maybe. Og brotgjarnt jarn. So, brotgjarnt is, gjarnt is like, it's cognate with yearn, but it's more like inclination towards this word in Old Norse. And brot is related to the verb brjóta, which is to break. So it's prone to break. In other words, it's fragile. It's fragile yarn, fragile iron. Og fivu farbóti. And farbóti is a word for arrow, again, so this is arrow. And we've got fivu, and fivu means, it's like the genitive, I think, of troll, a word for troll. It's like the arrow of a troll, or troll of the arrow. I think it's arrow of the troll here. It's a little confusing as to what that really means, but that's how I would translate that. Then we've got arcus ingligur, and arcus is Latin for bow, hence archery and related words from arcus in Latin. And also arch, they're bow shaped. And then we've got inglingr, and ingling means, well, there are a few different possible places this word can come from, and we know that they come from two different sources. This is not Yngling probably as in the Ynglinga saga, where it talks about the Ynglings, the descendants of Yngvi, the deity, which is sort of the story of the kings of Sweden, Ynglinga saga, but probably Ynglingur, a derivation of the word ungur, which means young, so it's like young one. And this seems to be a Haiti for prince. Now, it's possible it could be related to the former, because if it's kings of Sweden, this could just be like a Haiti referring to that. I think I've seen both explanations, but for the rune poem, I tend to see the latter, that it's just young one. So, and I think it's young yew that you usually make a bow out of. Woodsmith people, tell me if I'm wrong, please. All right. In any case, that is the last stanza of our Icelandic rune poem. So if there are no questions in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about my plan for the next few streams. So like I've said a few times now, we're going to do a comparison stream next week where I put side by side all the rune poems that we've done, the stanzas of each rune poem that have cognates in all three rune poems. And we will talk about connections, dissimilarities, trends between the three rune poems that we've looked at. And that will probably take 2 sessions, maybe less, maybe more. If we go into part of a second session, then I have backup stuff we can do for the second half of that session that might be rune related. And then, once we are done with that, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. We've been doing rune poetry in Old English and Old Norse for quite a while now, and in the in-between weeks we did more Old Norse in between the Norwegian and Icelandic ones, which made sense because it was between 2 Old Norse poems. We did Gothic between the Old English and the Old Norwegian one. We did some Gothic Bible stuff. And if people liked that, I'm down to do more Gothic stuff. Definitely. But I kind of want to switch gears a little bit to different kind of yesterlore content. Still reading old stuff in the original language. That's mostly what we're here to do, is look at old stuff in its original language and see what we can learn just by reading primary sources. But I would like to look at different kind of content. Rune poems have been fun. We may do more riddles in the future. Go back to Old English riddles, or look at other riddles. We did some Greek ones. Ancient Greek ones. In the past. But I want to look at some other kinds of poetry. And I really am interested in looking at some Arthurian poetry, particularly. And I would like to start with Arthurian poetry that might be a little bit more legible to the audience without as much of my help. Definitely I'm going to be there, of course, because I'm the one doing the stream. But I want to look at some Middle English, which will be a little bit of a contrast to what we've done thus far, where we've mostly been looking at Old English, some of which was a little understandable if you remember some of the prose we did when we were looking at legal type documents and stuff in Old English, and letters we saw written in Old English. But most of the Old English has been pretty oblique, especially because it's poetry. And we looked at Old Norse, and we looked at Egyptian and Greek. But Middle English is comparatively, it still has some difficulties, but it's comparatively a lot easier for modern English speakers to read. And I thought that would be fun for that reason, and also because I really want to look at some Arthurian literature. I really love Arthurian stuff, and we haven't really done anything Arthur-related because of what we've been looking at on the streams thus far. And I want to start with a poem called Sir Orfeo. Now, the cool thing about Arthurian literature, at least if it's not a modern retelling or something, is because it's so old, it's all public domain, and so I could just read it straight from sources. Sometimes the manuscripts in Middle English are, for me at least, even harder to read than in Old English, just because the Old English handwriting tends to be a little bit better, or at least less ornate. In the Middle English period, things get very serify, even more so than this font here. Things get very serify and flourishy, and a lot harder to read a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. So we're mostly going to be reading just from web pages that have these poems. And the first poem I would like to read is Sir Orfeo. It's one of my favorite ones, and it's edited by Anne Laskaya and Eve Salisbury. And it's from a collection called the Middle English Breton Lays that has just been digitized here. And you can see there is the poem on this side, which I will read in Middle English. And on this side, they just have some notes for words that they anticipate a modern English reader might have difficulty parsing. They don't do every word, and sometimes they don't gloss words that I think some modern English speakers would have trouble with, and why didn't they gloss it? Or they assume a sort of a sound alike is going to read the same as, like, will read as what a modern English speaker might interpret it as, but sometimes words that sound really similar don't mean quite the same thing, even if they look very familiar to a modern English speaker. So I think that's a little misleading sometimes. So you'll have me to help, as well as these notes that are on the side, and there are also sort of footnotes for different lines, which I am going to sort of prepare in advance, make sure I've read all the footnotes. I've read this poem quite a few times, so I'm very familiar with it. But this is the kind of thing I want to do, is I want to be looking at some Middle English stuff, read some Arthurian literature, because I find it very fun. And we'll get into some sort of fairy-type stuff in Sir Orfeo. Sir Orfeo is about fairies, or like the fairy realm, which is very exciting. And it'll be sort of our way of dipping into knights and King Arthur and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see that this poem is not quite a straight up Arthurian poem so much as a retelling of a classical story. And my challenge for you is guess what sort of classical story this is about based on mostly the name of the story. I think it's guessable, but might not be completely obvious right off the bat. But we'll definitely be talking about it when we read it. And it is not a super long poem either. It's got some length, but it's definitely not the longest poem, which is why I want to start with it. It's not the longest Middle English poem out there. It's kind of comparatively accessible. And as we go through Middle English poetry, I want to do a bunch of different poems, some more difficult than others. I won't be doing straight up only Middle English poetry from here on out. I don't want to make you think that that's all I'm doing from here on out, but it is something I'd like to move into. Since we've been doing rune poetry for so long, I'm trying to diversify, and I will intermittently do other things in between. We won't do straight up just medieval Arthurian literature only every single week for the foreseeable future. We will be doing other stuff kind of mixing it up as we go. Maybe we'll finish a poem and then do something random other thing and come back to another Middle English, or maybe not Middle English, Arthurian type poem. There's some old French stuff that I'm also interested in, and I'm currently studying Welsh, very beginner, but if there's some old Welsh stuff we can look at, that would also be pretty fun. So yeah, that's sort of my plan after we finish the rune poetry comparison, is to start reading Sir Orfeo. And once again, I will say I'm looking for more suggestions of things you would like to see me read. Old manuscripts, old things in the original language. I'm open to most things that will not get me demonetized and that are old. When I say old, I like to think 500 years or older. If it's more recent, that's okay. But I like things to be very, very old. That's just a preference I have. And I'm not opposed to something in Latin, definitely. It's not my favorite thing to read. We can do it. If you really want to read Latin stuff, that's totally fine. Or more ancient Greek stuff. I like ancient Greek. I'm a little more open to that even than Latin. So much medieval stuff is in Latin. Like, most medieval stuff is in Latin. And I am not always jumping at the chance to read it in Latin, just because it just feels comparatively boring. It's this kind of vernacular stuff that's in Middle English or in Icelandic. That's sort of like the rare find that you want to spend a lot of time with. That's my reasoning why we haven't really done anything in Latin yet. But if you really, really, really want to read something in Latin, please let me know, and I will try to fit it in somewhere. Even if it's just part of it, I'll try to fit it in somewhere. There is some interesting material, definitely in Latin. Like I said, most stuff was in Latin, so most stuff includes a lot of interesting stuff. It's just not what I love doing from a language perspective. It's not the most interesting language for me to read. It is beautiful, but it's not what I'm here to do. Okay, I don't think anyone has any questions or suggestions yet. Please leave them in the YouTube comments if you come back to this later. And I will excitedly read them and note them down on my list of things that I want to look into doing on these streams. And reminder, at some point tomorrow, to be revealed, basically when I start the stream, probably, I don't think I'll know ahead of time, I want to do a brief update stream that is looking at some of the other stuff I have planned in the future. We're going to do the comparisons and then Sir Orfeo, and then some other stuff I have planned. I haven't put it all in order, but based on suggestions and my own ideas of what I want to do, I have sort of a projected, tentative future plans for yesterlore, and that will be another chance for people to give suggestions, or at least having more information about what I plan to do, give them more ideas for other things they would like to see. So look out for that at some point tomorrow, or it will be uploaded onto YouTube after that point, as soon as I can. It won't be super long, so it will not take that long to upload, and so you'll see it there too, and you can leave comments, again, on that YouTube video once it's up. Thank you, everyone who came to read the Old Icelandic rune poem with us and finish it today. We're done with rune poetry, at least reading the rune poetry. We'll finish our rune poem adventure in the next couple weeks as we compare. Thank you, anyone who's watching this in the future on YouTube. I appreciate any comments, like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. If you want to see more, ring the bell. I never say this kind of thing. I never do this kind of call to action. But if you want to get notifications when my videos go up, ring the bell. And I will see you in the future. Have a good rest of your time zone for the night /day/afternoon. Thank you, and farewell.